We're going to be starting with a non-verbal reasoning topic, nets and cubes. Depending on the 11 plus you're taking, this may fall under a spatial reasoning topic because it's all about how we make something 2D form in 3D space. A cube is a 3D shape. For example, the dice that I've got in my hand here. And just like all dice, a cube has 6 faces. A net is a 2D shape. It's exactly what a cube would look like if it were laid flat. Now there's a number of arrangements that these squares might be in, but there will always be 6 of them. If we fold it up, we'll end up with another cube, just like this one. There's a couple of things we can look at that will always help us work out which faces of the cube will touch and which ones won't. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to find a right angle. For example, just here, a little bit like an L shape where there's a 90-degree gap. Wherever there's a right angle, I know that these two sides will touch. I can see another right angle just here. I can see another one up here. And I can see another one just here. Another thing I always know is that if there are 4 cubes, 4 squares in a row, the top and the bottom will eventually meet. Another thing I know for a fact is that any faces separated by another, for example, this one and this one, will always remain opposite on the finished cube. I'm going to fold this one up so that we can see how this ends up as a full cube. So, as you can see, as we begin to make the cube, the places that were right angles have now come together. There's another example just here. As you can also see, those 4 squares that were in a line are going to wrap around, and those 2 blue points are going to meet together. Something else I can do to help me, because I won't always have this exact formation, is once I've found these 2 yellow lines that meet at the right angle, I can work my way slightly further away from the point that they meet. So if this yellow is going to touch here, I'm going to move one side further this way, to this one here, and I'm going to move one side further this way to this one here. With a bit of luck, those 2 purple ones should meet. Let's try. So the yellows, we already know the right angles will come together, and the purple ones are going to touch too. We're going to take another look now with a net that I've actually drawn some pictures on. Now, something else that can help us is thinking about the direction of some of the figures that are given on each face of the net. For example, this arrow has a very clear direction. At the moment, it's pointing towards the top of this triangle. Now, it doesn't matter which way I move this net, those 2 points are always going to be facing each other, which means we can eliminate any cubes that have the arrow pointing away from the triangle. Likewise, this A is also has a clear direction. You can see that it has a point and it has a base. It's pointing the opposite way to the arrow. These things with direction, for example, the arrow, the triangle, even the little sailing boat and the bee, can give us a really good indication of which cubes we can eliminate. I'm going to try the same process again. For example, I'm going to draw my right angle sides that are going to meet. I'm also going to mark those faces that I know are going to meet because there are 1, 2, 3, 4 together. I'm also going to mark the fact that I know that this one and this one are never going to meet. And I'm also going to mark that if I go from here and one further round to here, similarly, so if I move one further round, I'm going to come here, and this one's going to come to here. Okay, looking at this, I know that the top of the A is always going to be facing the bottom of my boat. Let me show you that. I also know that the rounded part of my B, the belly, I think you would have learned when you were at school learning your letters and your phonics, is going to touch the base of the triangle. So I can eliminate any where the triangle might be pointing towards the B. I also know that my A and my star are going to be on opposing faces. They are never going to touch. Doesn't matter what I do, they're never going to touch. So therefore I can eliminate anywhere they might look like they are touching. I'm going to go through the exact same process. I'm going to locate a right angle and identify the sides that will definitely touch when we make a cube. For example, these two here and these two here. They're both at right angles. The same with this one and this one. I'm then going to go ahead and count those faces where I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 in a row, and I'm going to mark that this one would indeed touch this. I also know that these faces here, the star and the A, can never touch because they've got a square in between them on the net. I can also work away from the right angles, for example, this one and this one, and go to the next nearest side, the adjacent side, and I know that actually these two will eventually touch. The same over here. I'm going to start with a right angle. I'm going to move one side away in this direction, one side away in this direction, and I know that these two will touch, even if it's hard to believe when it's flat on a screen. Okay, this means we can work through some of the options and eliminate ones that can't possibly work. I'm going to start with the first one. Now I can see, using the direction of this arrow, that the arrow is always pointing towards the top of the triangle. In my first option, the arrow is actually pointing away from the pointy part of the triangle. It's pointing to its base. So I know that this can't possibly be an option. Moving on to the next one, well, I've got my A and my star next to one another. I know from looking at my net that these two faces will never touch. That's because there's a square in the middle of them. So I can eliminate this one. Now, even though it's hard to believe when it's flat on the screen, we do know that the base of the triangle will in fact touch the B because there are 4 squares in a row and they will always curve round. However, I can see that it's actually the curved belly of the B that will sit against the base of the triangle. Here I've got the B's straight edge touching the base of the triangle, so it also can't be this one. Now I can check the final one. Now I've got my arrow pointing towards the top of the triangle, so that works. I've also got the A touching the triangle. Now I can see from over here that actually, yes, the A is going to touch the triangle. And if I imagine them touching here, it is actually the base of the A, not the point, that would touch the side of the triangle. So yes, this one would work and it would be a correct answer.